Nothing stays the same forever, but seeing the changes that months, years, and even decades can have on everyday items in real time is completely mesmerizing. From the effects of playing way too much Minecraft to what a 50-year-old buildup of posters looks like, let's explore even more amazing examples of the power of time. How do you really tell how good your local barber is? Instead of looking at the slick fades and fresh trims, try looking at the bald spots they've worn into the floor. This barber has clearly been working around their clients for so many years that they've gradually worn a ring around the floor of their barber chair. And it's a problem endemic to many barbers. Whether they use laminate, linoleum, or even metal sheeting, their constant cutting and pacing sees most of them leave these little halos of wear and hair in their wake. Although barbers aren't the only ones who wear down their floors with years of use, as one grandma found out. When she moved into her home back in the 1960s, she laid down a beautiful bright red carpet in her bedroom. But when she moved her bed for the first time 60 years later, she was startled by the colorful contrast. The carpet around the bed had faded to a pinkish beige, but it was still bright red underneath, even after all that time. Years of walking around the room had gradually worn the carpet's color out, and you can even see the tinges of red in unused corners where it retained some of its colors. Wow, this is the OC of wear and tear. That is, if OC stands for original carpet. However, it's not just this grandma who's been floored by their flooring. Just take a look at this image. This family was getting ready to move to a new house when they lifted up their rug that hadn't been moved in over 16 years. While the family has clearly given the hardwood around the rug a run for its money, the sun has also played a role in fading these floors. In a process known as photodegradation, the ultraviolet light from sources like sunshine has breaks down the chemical bonds in the colors of objects, gradually fading unprotected surfaces like this. It's one of the reasons why painting and woodwork are usually covered in a reflective varnish, because it helps reduce the bleaching of their colors. Although even with varnish, scientists have found that some paintings, like Van Gogh's sunflowers, have slowly been changing color over time due to the light. These pretty petals started off as a vibrant yellow, but since it was painted over 140 years ago, the color is gradually fading to a muddy brown. This is because sulfate-rich dyes used in paints from the 1800s absorb UV light like a sponge, which oxidizes chemicals in the paint to give it that ruddy brown look on the canvas. But the worst part is that this effect is irreversible. Well, just like everything else in the world, I guess this classic Van Gogh is gonna be Van gone in time. But it's not just carpets, woodwork, and paintings that can be aged by the sun, as this unlucky American trucker discovered. Can you see how one side of his face looks way older than the other? Well, by spending more than 28 years of his life behind the wheel, this driver gradually developed a case of unilateral dermatoheliosis. For those of us that don't speak skin, that's a kind of one-sided aging caused by harmful UV rays. As he drove, the sunshine hit one side of his face more than the other through his cab window. This repeated one-sided exposure to ultraviolet radiation damaged the skin on the left side of his face, giving it a more wrinkled and sagging appearance than the right. Now, it's not just our faces that change with time, as there's another body part that can get bigger as we age. And before all the hopeful 12-year-olds start spamming the comments, no, it's not your pecker. It's actually your hands. They can slowly get larger for a number of reasons, like inflammation from arthritis or just weight gain. It's not usually an issue, except when it comes to wedding rings, like this grandfather found out. For more than 55 years, he couldn't remove his wedding band because it had gotten too tight. But when he finally decided to cut it off, the indent of the band remained perfectly pinched into his skin. As skin ages, its natural elasticity is lost, so even without the wedding band, it's likely his skin will keep that shape as a romantic reminder. Up next, it's time to take a look at some Tetherball. For those of you who've never played, Tetherball is a game where players hit a ball back and forth that's attached to a pole by a tether. Usually, it's attached using a rope, but in this insanely hardcore case, the ball's been attached by a metal chain. As it's been swung over the years, no doubt injuring many challengers, the chain has wound around the pole over and over again, leaving a scratched and rusted latticework behind it. Although with that much rust and accompanying sharp metal, maybe they should call this tetanus ball? Well, hitting that ball may not be a good idea, but hitting those like and subscribe buttons down below definitely is. I mean, with 0% chance of contracting tetanus, what have you got to lose? Now, where were we? A lot of people have accidentally chipped a wall in their home at some point, revealing the layers of paint underneath. But when this guy haphazardly knocked out this corner of his room, he managed to expose a whole chunk of his home's history. Each individual layer shows just how many times this room has been painted. It's a little difficult to see each one, but I count about 22 different layers. Though each layer takes up an incremental amount of space, it does make you realize that every time you paint over a room, it gets slightly smaller. But that corner's not the only thing Time's taken a chip out of. Just take a look at this strangely shaped stone. While it looks like it's been thrown in a running washer for a few cycles, it's actually a cinder block that's spent years tumbling around in ocean currents. The force of water and collisions with other ocean debris gradually wears down just about everything that enters the sea. Eventually, rocks and minerals like this are broken down so much that they become the grains of sand that make up our beaches. Although not all sand is the same. About 100 years ago, the residents of Fort Bragg in California used their incredible coastline as, believe it or not, a dirty dumping site. But today, all the smashed glass from that soiled site has been gradually smoothed down and dredged up onto the shoreline, creating a glittering glass beach. Whoa, this gives a whole new meaning to that old sands of time saying. Now, far from the sparkling shores of Fort Bragg lie the dirty streets of New York. Its skyline may be iconic, but its buildings have been horribly discolored over time by all the air pollution spewing from traffic, factories, and household emissions. But just how dirty are they? Well, take a look at these Manhattan apartments that were in the process of being cleaned by workers with high-power pressure washers. Yeah, many of those tar-black buildings are actually beige underneath. As bad as it looks, New York isn't the only city that's been plagued by the bad air. Manchester, England took on a similarly slick appearance back in the 1960s before the city introduced its Clean Air Act. After that, the buildings were scrubbed of about 80 years worth of grime and had their sparkling exteriors restored. While New York is hoping to reduce its own levels of air pollution by 40% by 2030, it's likely that its buildings will continue sporting this dirty facade. After looking at all that grime, let's head back to the ocean. There's something about the salty sea air that a lot of people find refreshing, but it's also surprisingly destructive. Don't believe me? Then just take a look at this incredible comparison. One of these doorknobs is on the inside of the door, and the other is on the outside, where it's been battered by an oceanfront breeze. No points for guessing which is which. The damage is caused by the salt from the ocean traveling through the air, which is incredibly corrosive by nature. It eats away at any and all metal it reaches, coating it in those telltale salt crystals and making the metal brittle. Well, it looks like this example is a joint effort between Old Father Time and Mother Nature. Although that's not the only handle Old Father Time has a grip on. One worker at a kids' science museum noticed the stark difference between an old handle compared to its replacement. Over time, kids had cranked the handle and cleaners had scrubbed it down until 15 years later, it was left looking like it was about to break. But what do you think it was attached to that made it so popular? Was it the crank of a candy machine, or was it attached to a toilet? Well, whatever it was, it seems like the joy of turning it eventually wore thin. While that last handle was worn down by curious minds, this one's clearly been worn out by idiots. The insane amount of scratch marks on this fake door in IKEA shows how many people have somehow been fooled by that horribly pixelated handle over the years. I guess it just goes to show that time really does make idiots of us all. Up next, I've got something with a little mystery behind it. Even though this pole and its supporting beam don't block this pathway, over the years, people have opted to walk around the beam, slowly carving out a second path. But why would they do that? Maybe this wandering trail is fueled by an unlucky superstition about walking underneath that beam? Or perhaps large groups of people can't all fit underneath it at once, and some walk around it? Or maybe this town has a lot of trailer park girls, because like Eminem famously says, they go around the outside. Yeah, I'm running out of ideas. So what do you think caused this peripheral path? Let me know down in the comments. Any chef worth their salt will tell you that a good knife is the most important tool in the kitchen. But to ensure they stay razor sharp, they require regular grinding, which removes any blunt metal from their leading edge. However, when you look at this old kitchen knife in comparison to its brand new brother, you can see just how much of the blade has been lost to the grind. It's a fairly common sight in commercial kitchens all over the world, but some professionals, like Michelin star chef Morimoto, use their knives so often that the blades and handles are worn down from this to this in just 3 years. What a cutting comparison. Speaking of cutting, have you ever been lucky enough to witness one of these things in action? Though it looks like a torture device, this is actually a tricone drilling bit. Those steely toothed heads are used to bore long continuous holes into the earth by grinding up and transporting rocks out of the way as they dig down. This allows workers to dig deep into the earth's crust in the search for resources like oil. But the pressure these drill bits are put under leads to some serious wear and tear. This is a drill bit before and after it's been used once. As you can see, its color's been completely stripped, and every last one of its teeth has been worn down to the base. It looks like it's drilled from one side of the earth to the other, but actually, this was from drilling just 388 feet down through a very tough crystalline rock called chert, and it wasn't cheap either. These drill heads, which are made of super hard materials like tungsten carbide or steel coated with natural diamond, cost around a staggering $10,000 each. My God, that's one seriously expensive hole they're digging. While many things wear down over time, others build up, like the layers of spray paint on the walls of Doornroosje in the Netherlands. Like a holy grail of graffiti artwork, this place has served as a hall of fame for spray paint artists since the 1970s. And after more than 40 years, so much paint has built up that parts of the wall can be peeled off, revealing cross-sections of all the years of color beneath. Working on the assumption that 2 or 3 new layers of paint were added every year, this cross-section dates back to around 1984. Though, why do you reckon pink took up so many layers around 2001? Did someone try to paint over the graffiti? Or did they squish a glob of bubblegum onto the wall? What do you reckon it is? Let me know down in the comments. But it wasn't just spray paint that got popular in the 70s. This was the time when posting up mass-produced flyers and bills as a form of marketing became all the rage. And this flyer revolution still hasn't stopped, as you can see from this completely plastered pole in Berlin. Incredibly, someone took the time to dig a hole in this pole, revealing most of its ever-growing girth was made up of innumerable layers of flyers. Considering people have plastered new flyers over the old ones instead of replacing them, there's a chance that there are flyers dating back to the 70s and 80s at its core. That means there could be more than 50 years worth of paper on this pole. Man, how time flies. It's important to make a good first impression at your job, although this guy seems to have taken that advice a little too literally. This Amazon worker's ID badge has been kept in its plastic sleeve for a little over a year. Even though it was protected, the unlaminated card was pressed to the plastic and gradually transferred the ink from the photo to the sleeve, leaving this incredibly creepy ghost image behind. For all the money they make, I think Amazon can afford to give their employees better quality ID cards. That much, as well as this photo, is clear. But when it comes to workers, nothing compares to Uber's well-oiled workforce. Most of these gig economy drivers work part-time, taxiing for an average of 10 hours a week. Some full-time drivers hit 35 hours a week, although there's one who looks like he put in more hours than that. This Uber driver's been sat at the wheel for so long that his elbow's worn a groove into the center console. That's some seriously specific wear and tear. But I bet if he places his arm even an inch off to the side, he really feels those cracks. Thanks to contactless technology, I can't remember the last time I used coins to pay for something. Although if I kept all my coins in my pockets for the next 60 years, there's a good chance they'd end up looking like this. From that very faint silhouette, you can just about tell that this shiny token is actually an old silver dollar. It belongs to the grandfather of Reddit user CoreyDH11, who claims the old man had kept the coin in his pocket since 1952. Apparently, he'd started carrying it out of sentiment after he got out of the army that year, and it went on to make a great conversation starter. But by 2013, the well-thumbed coin had lost most of its detail, making its heads indistinguishable from its tails. Although I'm more impressed that he managed to keep hold of something so small for more than 60 years. I mean, I don't know about you, but I lose things like my credit card every other week. Now, here's a mark of dedication that'll warm your heart. This is a bench belonging to a loving and very understanding cat owner, whose friendly feline routinely leans up and scratches just one of the wooden legs. From small scratches alone, it's clear this destruction didn't happen overnight. And it turns out it's taken 10 years of committed clawing to reduce the leg down to a thin stump. Makes you wonder how many splinters that cat got in its decade of destructive determination. And it's not just cats that can leave marks on your stuff as well as your heart. Say hello to Cobb, a very good dog who's kept in the backyard when his owners go out. But every time he hears their car return, he eagerly runs up to the back door and proceeds to tap his feet in excitement, a bit like this guy. Aww. And like that wasn't cute enough, Cobb's so dedicated to his little tap dance routine that over the years it's slowly worn down the parts of the mat he dances on. That's just so adorable. I'm not crying, you're crying. Some people just can't resist petting a dog, even if it's on a plaque like this one. This bronze relief can be found at the base of the St. John of Nepomuk statue in Prague. But bronze contains copper, which oxidizes when it comes into contact with the air. This produces a brownish-green layer of grime that protects the metal from corrosion. But despite the grime, tourists just can't resist petting the picture, which they believe, as part of a superstition, means they'll return to Prague one day. But the years of superstitious stroking have kept the oxidized grime at bay, leaving this bronze boy super shiny. Although not all superstitious strokes are so wholesome. Case in point, this poor fella at Zion National Park in Utah has had his chest worn down by a couple of nipple rascals, and this unfortunately fondled statue in Munich has been rubbed by tourists wishing for luck in love. Though I bet they looked like real boobs as they did it. But not all bronze sculptures look the same, as Giuseppe Ponone proved when he created this piece of art way back in 1968. It's called Continuerà a crescere, tranne che in quel punto, which, to all non-Italians out there, translates roughly as it will continue to grow except at this point. Giuseppe made a cast of his own hand in bronze and attached it to the trunk of a young sapling. Over several decades, the tree has continued to grow and thicken. But, like the name of the piece suggests, it can't outgrow the grip of Giuseppe's bronze hand. Now, it looks like the hand is stretching the bark back with its fingers. It may have taken over 3 decades to produce, but I think we can all agree that this piece is timeless. Not all trees grow the way humans want them to, like the poor owners of these things discovered. It's like the trees have slowly swallowed each item up. But while they all look like the trees just grabbed a quick snack, this is a process that's taken decades. As they get older, the ever-thickening bulk of a tree's trunk grows in the path of least resistance, which is usually upwards and out. But if they encounter a large object in their way, they can't just sprout legs and move on to another location, or in the case of the sign, shake it off. So in order to grow bigger, they have to gradually grow around, over, or even through solid objects. Like this tree, which not only enveloped a fence, but grew all the way through it, leaving that chicken wire crisscross pattern scarred into its trunk. Anyone up for a game of tic-tac-toe? Now, I know some of you will argue that there's no such thing as too much Minecraft. The super fun sandbox adventure game is the world's best-selling video game to date. But as popular as it is, some people, like the owners of this iPad, clearly play it way too much. Those rainbow-like stains aren't patches of dirt, but patches of screen pressure distortion. This happens when repeated or sustained pressure on a glass touchscreen compresses the liquid crystal display, or LCD screen, beneath. The shift of these crystals causes the color they reflect to change, and the more pressure is applied, the more they ripple, just like this. So this kid was either mashing those Minecraft buttons way too hard or for way too long. While it might not be as popular as Minecraft, the number puzzle Sudoku is also a well-loved game, or at least it is with this iPad owner. Those rows of what look like greasy fingerprints will make some clean screen freaks out there feel really uncomfortable. But like that Minecraft iPad, this can't be wiped off. Some smartphone and tablet screens have something called an oleophobic coating, which makes the device feel smoother and keeps fingerprint spots off the screen. But if it's overused in specific places, like along the projected boxes of a Sudoku grid, the coating in these spots can gradually wear out. Who knew the effects of time could turn into a numbers game? Now, the famously nerdy Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game may run on imagination, but even some of its creative components are subject to wear and tear. First published back in 1974, the retro tabletop game relies on players rolling a series of specially made polyhedral dice to decide their fate. When these first came out, they looked super sharp, but after years of rolling, some hardcore Dungeons & Dragons fans have really worn their dice down. These 20-sided dice, or D20s if you're down with D&D, have been used by one man for more than 30 years. You can barely make out the numbers on those faces anymore, and in that state, they look like they'd make better marbles than dice. When it comes to the realms of math and science, engineering has been a famously male-dominated industry for centuries. Even today, just about 14% of the US engineering workforce is made up of women. While that figure sounds shockingly low, it becomes hilariously clear that it's real when you take a look at the male and female bathroom doors at this engineering university. The wear of all those hands on the men's side versus the practically pristine paintwork of the women's shows just how little use the women's room really gets. Looks like this place could use a woman's touch. Now, did you know there are more than 78,000 pizza restaurants in the US? While they're all fighting for a slice of the pizza pie market, there's one restaurant that stands out, literally. The linoleum floor of this pizzeria has been gradually worn down over the years by people waiting at its counter, revealing an old retro tile design beneath. Not only that, but the distinctive deterioration is so iconic that when this image was posted to Reddit, multiple users immediately recognized it as Angelo's Pizza Place in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I guess the pizza must be really good there. Either that or the service is extremely slow. Which of these examples really took you back? And do you know of any others like them? Let me know about them down in the comments, and who knows, you might get featured in another video about the awesome power of time. Thanks for watching.